Hey everyone, what I'd like to do today is talk about Raspberry Pis and talk about why I still think they're useful. I still think they have value. Now, before going on, I just want to quickly point the obvious. I have a spinning Raspberry behind me. This is a new pixel art display that was sent out to me. Pretty awesome, by the way. I'll do a review of this soon, but I just wanted to point it out because I was so pleased that I found a spinning Raspberry for this video. So this is a follow-up to a video I published 4 or 5 years ago entitled "You're Missing the Point of Raspberry Pi." Now, I think most of what I said in that video remains true. Kind of self-explanatory what I was talking about, but I'll leave a link to the video so that you guys can check it out. But I just kind of want to quickly touch upon some of the main criticisms that Raspberry Pis have, one of which being that they are now getting too expensive. So there's been a lot of Raspberry Pis out over the last few years and the price has gone up. But you really have to put an asterisk on that. You take the Raspberry Pi 5, for example. The original Raspberry Pi came out 2012 and it was like, I can't remember the price, maybe 20 bucks, 30 bucks. Those initial Raspberry Pis, one of the bottlenecks and one of the problems they had was that they didn't have a lot of memory. So then they brought out all these additional versions that had more memory. With the Raspberry Pi 5, when it came out, there was like a 4 and an 8, I think. I can't remember if there was a 2 gig. There might have been a 2 gigabyte as well. And that gave you the option to buy the version that you needed. But they now have a 16 gigabyte version. So you can see the options there. 2 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes, or 16 gigabytes of memory. And this is the thing. A lot of people say you don't need that much memory. The CPU is a bottleneck. Well, there are some applications, machine learning, that maybe you would use that. But if you think those computers are too expensive, then buy the model that has less memory or go back a generation. You'll still find Raspberry Pis that are like 10, 20, 30, or 40 bucks. For example, I've still got the 02W to set up, and I've still got my old 3B, which I'm not letting go of just because I still think it's a great little computer to have. It's so useful. So there's still lots of old versions of Raspberry Pi out there, and they're super cheap. So this criticism of Raspberry Pi is getting too expensive now, well, yes, for the more expensive modules with a lot of memory, that is true. But the other criticism, don't buy a Raspberry Pi, buy a ABC, buy something else. And those criticisms have always been there with the Raspberry Pi. And perhaps they've been there even more over the last few years because we now have the Orange Pi and we've got, single board computers such as the Zima board, which, as you've seen on my channel before, this is, more versatile. It's got SATA ports, it's got dual Ethernet, it's more powerful, it's got a better CPU. All those types of things. That is valid criticism. That is something I can't really argue with. There are more powerful solutions out there, and there always will be, because Raspberry Pis are not designed to be the most powerful solution. If you're looking at a Raspberry Pi and then you completely change and buy like a mid-sized PC, then this was probably never for you. This is amazing for a few reasons. The reason you buy a Raspberry Pi, one is they are fairly cheap, and not only cheap to buy, but they are cheap to run. What these are designed for, really, for the industry anyway, is to run something, a single application or two applications, 24 hours a day. And you can do it with very little power, very little wattage. They're so low powered, but you can do so much with it. So for applications like that, this is where it makes the most sense. Something that you need on all the time, 24/7. If you're just going to buy a PC, switch it on, browse the web, and then switch it off, don't buy a Raspberry Pi. Yes, it can do all that, but in more situations or not, you're better gravitating towards a mini PC or an old desktop or something like that. These are just great because you can hide these behind displays. You can put them in a lot of weird and wonderful places. You can run it 24 hours a day, and it's cheap and it's very easy to set up. And that's the other thing that I love about this. If you look at the Zima board, if you look at Orange Pi and all these communities, all these different solutions out there, these other single board computers do have communities. They do have different options, but as soon as you start drilling into it, they just do not have the same ecosystem as Raspberry Pi. They're not as easy to set up. You'll run into more problems. There's not as many accessories. There's not as many tutorials. There just isn't the same community for it. And that's another reason to buy this, because you will get support. Now, from my own point of view, and for many others, this was designed as an educational tool. And I have been using it for that. I use this a lot for testing. And you can see here, for example, another reason I love this is this has Raspberry Pi OS. I think that's a version of Debian. But then I've got Ubuntu. Now that doesn't seem like a big thing to be able to do that, because you can change operating system. You can change operating systems on pretty much any computer. But if I want to change it on Windows, I need to go into the boot manager, change what boots, maybe set up a partition or something. And even in other single board computers, I need to change the boot manager, etc. Change the boot priority. Here I can just switch out a micro SD card and test something else. Flash something new onto an SD card, put it in, and I'm good to go. That's definitely under the first world problem type of category. But there is a lot of value in that. If you're messing about with stuff all the time, you just want to quickly boot up a different version of something or new software, you want to do it quickly, you just put it onto an SD card, you throw it into the Raspberry Pi, and you can test things. And I found that to be incredibly useful. Even recently, when I was setting up my mini PC with Ubuntu, I did some tests with this first, and I was messing about with some things and testing out some remote desktop applications and setups. And I just tested it here. I didn't have to go mess around with partitions or, changing boot priority with my main PC. I just set up things here very quick. And it's really useful for that because, for example, I was looking at maybe buying a dedicated firewall device and I can put on pfSense. Well, before I buy anything, I should try pfSense. Just throw it into a Raspberry Pi. So that kind of thing, a lot of people don't care about that, but I do like to play around with things. I do like to test things. I do like to try new applications. And that's where the Raspberry Pi is really useful for me. For others, it's using something 24 hours a day and running it 24/7. And that's maybe what I will set this up as. I've actually been testing it as a remote desktop tool that I can kind of log in remotely to and do it securely. But there's a lot of value in that for me, just from a testing perspective. And I just love how many different accessories that I can build this up on it and be more flexible with. So I will reiterate that this is a follow-up to my video a few years ago. And again, I do think the landscape is different now. We have so many different options out there. And I'm not criticizing anyone who doesn't buy a Raspberry Pi. I'm not an evangelist. I'm not someone that's like, you have to, go into the cult of Raspberry Pi. I'm not like that. I've got other solutions, other single board computers, the Mac Mini, the Mini PC that had Windows and now Linux. I'm experimenting with a lot of different things, and they all have their place. They really do have their place. But I still find value in these things, despite the fact there's more options out there now. I still think where the Raspberry Pi wins is, for 24/7 operation, but also the community. And when you're playing around with things and testing things, and you're kind of finding your feet, that kind of community is incredibly valuable. But I'll put it over to you guys. I'd love to hear from you who use Raspberry Pis, and I'd love to hear from those of you who do not. There's many ways to do this, guys. There's no right or wrong answer. You do you. But just remember, one size does not fit all. Just because a Raspberry Pi might not fit your needs doesn't mean that it won't fit someone else's needs. But I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. If you have, click the thumbs up button, click subscribe. As always, post a comment, give me your 2 cents on all of this. And until next time, take care.